Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Kelly and Steve here. So you guys have been behind a pretty interesting platform that's been very innovative in terms of trading and applying, I think, much better techniques to the space that have been used by a lot of big names as banks. Like Jeffries, for example, is one of them that's really been able to take advantage of what you guys have to offer. And you have assembled an incredible team with a Nobel Prize economist that's advising you. You have some of the brightest minds from different banks around. And you started this and have known each other for a long time. So you guys have been able to finally build something really together. So I'm excited to have you guys here and again to your story.
Thanks. Yeah. Appreciate you just having us on.
Awesome. So, you guys met in pretty early on, I think in middle school. Were you ever discussing making a company at that point? Like how did this passion to build something together begin?
I think the only thing we were discussing at that point was how to best make trouble and cause problems for our principal. Building a company phase started much, much later in life.
So how did your passion, like in general, just for tech, you guys were into, I think, mathematics and computer science. How did the passion for like technology start in each one of you? You can go first.
Yeah. I mean, we grew up around computers. We were tinkering a lot with computers back in the high school days, doing independent studies and programming and all that. So I studied computer science and economics, and always knew I wanted to work in the software world, and sort of went into the cybersecurity and distributed systems domain, which plays a bit of a role in OneChronos. And while I was doing that, Kelly was doing quant trading and at HFT at a hedge fund.
Yeah, I think it's kind of boredom's the mother of invention in a way. So we grew up in a suburb where probably the most exciting thing going on was the McDonald's a couple blocks away from us. So got into computers and tinkering very early in life. This is something to do, and it really stuck with me. And we were both fortunate to have some exposure with people that had worked in computers really from the beginning. The guy that taught us assembly language at high school was early Martin Marietta employee. So as far as motivations, I can't say as they were all good ones at the time. It was a lot of video games and a lot of fun things that you could do with video games, but it was enough to get me interested in programming.
And were you starting to build something that was like kind of your own at that point in time? Like when did it become an ambition to really build a company?
Yeah, that was definitely something we didn't talk about or consider until we got into the professional world. So I can speak to my journey on this anyway, and I'm sure Stephen will do the same. But I got very interested at university in this concept of making a lot of money to fund basic scientific research, because having the privilege of being around a bunch of really brilliant academics and seeing, despite what they're capable of on a technical level, the actual limitations a lot of times are capital and time. And just thinking through, hey, as far as maximizing impact here, I'd be interested in going the business route and really seeing if I could use that as an accelerant for education and research in general, as opposed to the other way around. So that got me interested in making money. And when you're thinking about making money, there's a couple of paths, finance being a pretty good one.
Yeah, I think, for me personally, I love building things, and I don't think this is a super unique property, but, building software is a bit of a gateway drug into building a company. So, the thought had crossed my mind throughout my career, but it's really challenging. There's a lot of different things that have to go right to even make the decision to start a company. And one of those things is having a founder that you know and can trust. And that's a very rare opportunity. So among many other factors and reasons, that was definitely a big one.
So how did you land on this specific idea for OneChronos? Like what led to that?
Yeah, that's also an interesting one, since it goes back to the trying to maximize impact and make money challenge, really. So when I was an undergrad at Caltech, I had the extreme fortune and time to overlap with a gentleman named Preston McAfee, who is very famous in auctions and market design and some other kind of related fields around incentives, antitrust included. And he was working at Caltech, but his main job at the time was he was at Yahoo. He was working on auctions and ad design at Yahoo. and really talking to him about what was going on in industry and seeing the impact of his research and the crossover between academia and how it was having very real world impact for a very hot company. It was very exciting and interesting. So that got me interested in auctions, initially motivated by that really, but then the more I dug into it, I was like, wow, all of humanity on some level is an incentives problem, and starting to think through like how you engineer good incentives and how auctions and mechanism design in general are a good way of approaching societal problems, whether that's getting drug discovery funded, whether that's building infrastructure, whether that's making businesses run more efficiently. It's pretty universal. So that's what got me interested in doing something in auctions specifically.
Yeah, and another big component that led up to OneChronos was just the evolution of high frequency trading and really electronification of trading, and sort of how that played out in the stock market was you have many different exchanges that went electronic around the same time within years of each other. And from a pure system standpoint, that starts looking a lot like a distributed database or just a distributed system in general. And this is a domain that both Kelly and I had done some work in, distributed systems, and have been following academic literature in that for basically our whole careers. And there are papers back from the 70s and 80s that describe exactly the problem that exchanges and traders have been trying to solve for the past 20 years. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and took a, how would you build design a distributed system to handle some of these market problems?
And what were you thinking, like, was kind of the way you were going to design this, and how has that evolved to where it's at now?
Yeah, I mean, it strangely has evolved and not evolved in some ways over 10 years we've been talking about this idea and working on it. A lot of what has evolved is some of the fine tuning of the details about, how long does it take us to run an auction and what types of orders do we accept or not accept. We took the approach of involving the industry. So talking to hundreds of different customers, hedge funds, banks, brokers, et cetera, sort of involving the industry in the design process. And that worked out really well, I think. And that's a big part of why, we've had the adoption we have, is we took our time to make sure we were satisfying everyone's needs with the sort of novel mechanism.
And so you guys were part of YC. You went through YC. I mean, there's a lot of talk about like the benefits of YC and what it does for you. Like, how would you say that it really benefited you guys to get to where you are today?
I think YC is good for a couple of things. So one I'll point out is, at the time we did it, it was a slightly different institution as far as like, I don't think startup school was a thing. A lot of the resources weren't online. So there was really the question of how do you get access to this knowledge from people who have done it before? And now people say, okay, well, a lot of YC is online. So what value is there still? And I'm here to say that I think there's a tremendous amount of value in it, because the part that you really only get as being part of the batch is access to the partners who, in a lot of cases, have really been there, done that, and lived through some of the highs and lows that you have as a founder, but also just have an amazing network of people that really want to help you out, want to see you succeed. So I think YC is about the network. The network is getting bigger. It's people talk about YC is getting very large now. That's a good thing. Like, you want your school to have a large alumni basis of people that are increasingly successful and connected, and that's really what we've seen happen. And I don't think we would be here if it wasn't for YC on a lot of levels. Certainly not in this flavor, anyway.
Yeah, it was a huge difference for us early on. We're coming. I think it did give us some credibility as well with the Silicon Valley investment community. We've always been a bit of an odd startup. We're in a very niche industry that not a lot of people have experience in, and so we were kind of in the camp of, we should take whatever third party credibility we can get, and YC definitely provided that. And the partners there, in particular, like Kelly said, we've stayed in touch with the two partners that we worked with closely there for the entire life cycle of the company. And they've also helped out a lot at, a bunch of different phases of the company.
That's awesome. So it was the network that was really key, just the people there.
Yeah, absolutely. You can watch YC Startup School online and get the content. The part that you can really only experience is going through it and having that shared experience and that network that comes out of it.
Makes sense. So now I think you're at like $2.5 billion a day in equities that are traded, and you have some incredible clients. How did you take it from, you mentioned this was a pretty different industry to even be getting into, to now become so established and have these types of clients and have that type of scale from a technology standpoint, but also from getting these types of partners? How are we able to do that?
Yeah, and we're fortunate to have grown so fast that number is now fairly out of date. We've had some days that are substantially more than that at this point. And really, the initial act of getting customers was finding partners that were interested in innovating in this space, that appreciated some of the nuance of what it is that we were trying to solve for, and really talk through the first principles of it. Since every marketplace that's going live has the chicken and the egg problem of how do you actually get everyone to concretely go there and do something. Everyone can agree that something might be a better way of doing business, but unless you can have that coordinated lift and drop exercise, it's really challenging. And that totally ties back to what I mentioned briefly before of the incentives problem of mechanism design, of like thinking through how do you engineer systems that result in the incentive properties that you want. And the incentive property we want in this case is people adopting us as a trading venue and using it and growing with us. So it's pretty baked into our DNA and design structure that like we never thought of it as anything other than just build the product that we would want ourselves as traders and portfolio managers, and then get the message out there.
Yeah, I mean, and it worked, So that's the thinking made a lot of sense at that point in time. But now it's become, I think, a much different industry today where, it's more accepted to be building in this space too. And I think you guys are a result. You guys are a catalyst of that, of more people trying to build in this area, which is good to see.
Yeah, we see continued innovation in the space, which is fantastic to see. And it really is a rising tide raises all boats situation. So we're very excited for the innovation in capital markets in general.
Definitely. So you brought in some great advisors, one of which Nobel Prize economist. How impactful was that to you? Like, what ways did that really benefit you besides being around somebody like that has that type of credibility and you can get advice from them? How else did it impact you?
That's the key part. We've put together an excellent team of academics that have applied work experience in this field as well. So getting to know Paul as part of building OneChronos has been one of my favorite parts of being at the company, and just in general having the academic network that we get to work with on a regular basis. And it really is a field where there's a direct translation between what's happening in research, what our understanding of the incentive properties of these mechanisms are, what the computational properties are, and what we can do for our customers. It's very cool to seeing a direct pipeline of research and papers in academia to results that we can put in people's hands to benefit the marketplace.
Yeah, and there's no better community of people to just brainstorm ideas with. Like if we're looking at entering a new market, so we've announced publicly we're moving into EU and UK equities and FX trading. Each of those markets, these are still in the capital markets world, still have a lot of similarities to how US equities trades, but there are some subtle differences in having that community of that backing of academic research and people who have been thinking about markets problems as their entire career has been instrumental in just making those decisions about how the product works that people can be comfortable with and feel like they can become a day one user of.
What do you think it's going to, how different do you think it's going to be scaling to those regions you mentioned than currently where you are in the US?
Yeah, the way we think about it is every region and every product class has its own nuances to it. And we try to go first principles for every new product that we move into. It's not just an application of the mechanism that we have or the exact technology that we have in any one region. It's an application of the same principles that we've used to develop markets applied to new asset classes and geographies. So like FX is a perfect example where there's a ton of nuance to it that's not in US equities and vice versa. And the mechanism that we have there certainly shares some aspects of the OneChronos equities venue. It's a periodic auction. It's more specifically something called a smart market, which is the proper noun academic term for auctions that clear using constrained mathematical optimization. But that's kind of the end of the commonalities there. Everything from the frequency that we run it in to exactly how we prioritize and match orders. There's adaptations that make it more appropriate for that space, as opposed to just trying to shoehorn what we have into a new asset or geography.
And what are your thoughts on crypto and having that involved in what you're doing?
It's been that's been a question we've been asked since day one of the venue. I mean, it's certainly an interesting domain. I think in particular on the clearing and settlement side of things, one of the sort of boring operational problems that ends up being one of the biggest problems you have to solve as a startup in anywhere in the trading world is how do you handle clearing and settlement and margin and those sort of back office concepts. So in the equities world, everything is very centralized and all the paths are very well trodden. It's very clear how you have to go about the clearing and settlement process. But in a lot of other asset classes, it's not. And I think, distributed ledger technology generally could really lower the barrier to entry if it takes off as like a clearing and settlement mechanism in other industries. The other piece of it that's interesting about crypto is, so smart markets, the class of smart market that we're developing is rooted in algorithmic game theory. So it's all about figuring out how to take algorithmic agents or AI agents and let them negotiate and really coordinate with each other in a central marketplace. Crypto has a ton of that. So that makes it very appealing as well.
Yeah, that's certainly become an academic playground as far as a lot of the folks that we work with academically in mechanism design are all super interested in crypto just because there has been so much innovation in that space and willingness to entertain new and different economic concepts. So I think it's interesting to think of it from that angle. And then like Steve said, there are just some very interesting applications of it to the clearing and settlement space in particular. So we continue to explore those.
Yeah, it's definitely promising. I think we're so early in the space now. But like you mentioned with some of the settlement issues, like it can be a great solution there for having blockchain involved in that aspect. But you have AI enhanced trading abilities, and you guys have implemented that. I think there's a lot of talk about AI now, but you have a real practical application that you've done. Can you just talk about like how you built these like enhanced trading abilities with AI agents? You touched on it a little bit before, but I'd love for you to share some more on that.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're always really careful to draw the distinction on is how AI is used in the match process, because this is a huge consideration for anyone in financial services of, hey, do I get a explainable and deterministic outcome for the same set of conditions in and results out? And the way that we use AI is to accelerate the search and solving process for what is otherwise a computationally intractable optimization problem. And that really goes all the way up the design stack of thinking about the class of algorithms that we're using to solve these types of auctions, but also actually simulating the agents that participate in it. Probably the best and most direct analogy for how some of this stuff works, not specifically at OneChronos, but just in general, is AlphaGo and AlphaZero and some of the early work on getting reinforcement learning to play games, which is really this notion of, can you use machine learning with classical AI search techniques to prioritize the search space and more intelligently explore in a way that's time and resource bounded? So like the game of Go, for example, you could play it perfectly, same for chess, if you had, and well, not an exaggeration, it's not even all of the energy in the universe, it's an unfathomable amount of energy beyond that would be necessary to run the raw computation to actually solve the game of Go or chess to completion from a starting point. So what you can do, however, is use machine learning in combination with classical search to more intelligently prioritize the way that you look at potential moves and configurations. And that's the next chapter for the space of hard combinatorial optimization problems. Combinatorial auctions being one of them, protein folding and drug discovery being others. But the actual match process itself is deterministic and based on a very easily understood objective function that we're solving for.
Yeah, I think that last part is, what's made it easier for us in some ways to adopt these kind of technologies, which is just that, AI fits in really well in cases where it gives you back an answer and it's super easy to tell if that answer is correct or not, or if that answer is good or not. And we're lucky to be in a domain where the question we're giving it is literally a math problem. And it's very easy to tell if we were to, give this question to many different AI and non-AI solvers. It's very easy for us to tell which one provided the best answer back for that. So it's kind of a very safe enclosure for the use of lots of different approaches and techniques for optimization.
And where do you see, like, I mean, this is an application you have now. Where do you see AI affecting the space in general? Like, what are some of the areas you think it's going to have the biggest impact in investing and trading?
I think it's going to remove a lot of kind of operational limits that exist. And I'm very excited for the human in the loop possibilities here, as far as there's a lot of drudgery that goes into financial research, being a portfolio manager, being an investment banker, that really can be accelerated by this process, allowing folks to focus on higher value activities and prospecting. And I also think it's going to deliver a higher quality of service to a much larger user base, because generally the way that a lot of this works right now is it's a resource constrained problem. So if you're managing a $10 billion investment portfolio, you get resources commensurate with that. And the question is, like, can you scale that in a way where someone with a $10,000 investment portfolio can have the same access and class of services? And our best chance of getting there really is by removing a lot of the operational costs associated with doing that.
Yeah, one thing we talk a lot about is just the increase in possibilities for what people could be investing in, or even outside of the investing world, what kind of transactions can be done. So if you're a financial advisor, maybe you can, with the help of AI, fine tune a portfolio better for all of your customers based on their specific needs. And then outside of AI, outside of finance, we think there's a ton of marketplaces that are markets, but aren't really viewed as markets today. So if you own like a small last mile shipping company in your city, can AI help you find better routes and buy and sell space in your trucks and do that more efficiently and with less risk to your business? So those are the really exciting areas for us as we broaden outside of the capital markets world.
Yeah, that is a bit more outside what I was thinking, but yeah, there's a lot of potential for sure.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah. So just the last question I have, what do you guys aspire to accomplish now? Like, if you had to say some short-term goals, some long-term goals, what would those be? And what's your big picture vision for OneChronos at this point?
Yeah, that's a great question, since the way that we're positioned right now, it is just very squarely a capital markets company, and we operate a US equities ATS. That's the beachhead. It's not where we want to be at all. We picked a specific product to start with for those reasons. We started with US equities. We think it's a great market. It'll continue to be a huge focus of ours. The direction of travel in general is what we're calling building the bazaar for AI of the future, where agentic AI comes to do business, basically. And kind of to Steve's point, there's a lot of things that are not capital markets now that have the potential to start behaving a lot more like capital markets. Aspects of logistics is a really good example. The supply chain there's a lot of things that can and should be optimized, but there's just so many manual processes and so much nuance involved in it that there's not really a practical way to do so until you get to a point where you have decently strong agentic AI that understands the assignment really and can think through how to meet the constraints, how to bid in these combinatorial marketplaces. That's personally what I'm most excited for. And as a company, our goal is to grow the global domestic trade. Like we exist as a market design company to try to remove friction out of the system in a way that allows other industries to be the best version of themselves. And we're going to continue to strive to that by designing smarter and smarter markets.
Do you want to add anything to that, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to top that. I think in between now and broadening outside of capital markets, I think the short term side of things, we'll get up and running in Europe and FX, and I think that'll be a big milestone because we can then show that this market model is not just for U.S. equities. So I think we've proven at this point that it works really well for how things trade in U.S. equities, and then the next proof point on that journey to removing friction from marketplaces that don't even have a concept of an exchange. I think the next step of that journey is to just prove that this same model can work elsewhere. And so that's very exciting. That's the next year for us is, largely focused on that.
Well, definitely excited to see where you guys are going to go next and how you're going to expand outside of your, traditional horizon you guys have been in. I think what you've done already with AI has been really interesting, and it's been very much improving efficiency, which is incredibly important to the space that you're in. And I'm excited to see where you guys are going to go next. So thanks for coming on and doing this.
Thanks. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Ben.